6 months after the incident at New Haven, the Galactic Council chambers on Central Station buzzed with unprecedented activity. Representatives from over 400 species filled the vast amphitheater, their attention focused on a small viewing screen that showed footage of a honey badger coordinating the defense of a human settlement. Council Speaker Thylos, a being resembling a giant mantis with silver carapace, called for order as the assembly reviewed the evidence for the third time that day. "The footage has been authenticated by our best forensic analysts," Thylos announced, her translated voice carrying across the chamber. "What you are observing is not fabricated or enhanced. This creature, designated Winston by its human companion, successfully organized and led a multi-species defensive operation against Vraktar the Collector and his mercenary forces." In the gallery reserved for observers, Dr. James Chen sat with Emma and Winston, watching as the galaxy's most powerful beings debated the implications of their lives. Emma wore her best dress for the occasion, while Winston wore a small collar with a translator device, a gift from the Council's Xenobiology department that would allow him to communicate if he chose to. The honey badger had shown little interest in speaking, preferring to observe the proceedings with the same calm intensity he brought to everything else. But his presence had already changed the nature of the debate. Several representatives had requested to examine him personally, treating him not as an animal, but as a fellow intelligence deserving of respect. Representative Kralthax of the Hegemony Coalition stood to address the assembly. The massive being looked like a cross between a bear and a rhinoceros, his voice rumbling through the translation systems. "Honored colleagues, we face a precedent that threatens the very foundation of our collection and specimen acquisition laws. If we acknowledge that these companion animals possess tactical intelligence and the right to defend their associates, where does it end? Will every pest and predator on every world demand legal protection?" Murmurs of agreement rippled through certain sections of the assembly. The galaxy's collectors, traders, and exotic specimen dealers had powerful representation in the council, and they saw the implications clearly. If animals could be considered partners rather than property, entire industries would collapse overnight. But Representative Silandra of the Peaceful Worlds Alliance had a different perspective. The crystalline being's faceted body refracted the chamber's lights into rainbow patterns as she spoke. "Honored Speaker, we are not discussing random animals. The evidence clearly shows purposeful cooperation between humans and their companions that goes far beyond simple training or conditioning. This represents a form of interspecies partnership that we have never encountered before." The debate had been raging for hours, but it was interrupted by an unexpected request. Through the translator device, Winston's voice emerged for the first time, a calm, measured tone that somehow conveyed both intelligence and ancient wisdom. "I would like to speak," he said simply. The chamber fell silent. In all the galaxy's recorded history, this was the first time a non-sapient species had requested to address the council directly. Speaker Thylos consulted hastily with the council's legal experts before responding. "The council recognizes Winston of Earth. You may speak." Winston stood up on his hind legs, his small form somehow commanding the attention of beings thousands of times his size. When he spoke, his words were simple but profound. "You debate whether I am intelligent enough to protect my family. You argue about laws and rights and property. But you miss the simple truth. Emma is my cub. Threat to cub means death to threat. This is not law. This is nature. Humans understand this. Do you?" The silence that followed was deafening. Winston had cut through hours of legal debate with a few sentences that every being in the chamber could understand on a fundamental level. Across species barriers, across evolutionary differences, the drive to protect one's young was universal. Representative Thylos made a note on her official record pad. "The Council acknowledges the Speaker's statement. Are there any responses to this testimony? What happened next would be remembered as the moment of understanding. One by one, representatives from different species began sharing their own stories of protective behavior. Parent defending child, pack protecting member, hive sacrificing for queen. The universal nature of family bonds became impossible to ignore. Dr. Velnara of the Scientific Consortium, a being that resembled a walking tree with glowing fruit for eyes, provided the crucial perspective. Honored colleagues, our xenobiology teams have spent the last 6 months studying the human-animal partnership phenomenon. What we discovered challenges our understanding of intelligence itself. She activated a holographic display showing brain scans and behavioral analysis from Earth animals. These creatures do not possess the same type of intelligence as sapient species. Instead, they demonstrate what we term specialized collaborative intelligence, the ability to work with humans in ways that enhance both species' capabilities far beyond what either could achieve alone. The display showed footage from dozens of human colonies across the galaxy, dogs detecting geological instabilities that human sensors missed, cats identifying toxic plants that would have poisoned settlements, horses carrying humans across terrain where vehicles failed. Each example demonstrated the same principle. Humans and their animal companions were stronger together than apart. The implications, Dr. Velnara continued, extend far beyond this single incident. Humans don't simply own their animals. They form genuine partnerships with them. To separate them would be like cutting off a limb from a functioning organism. Representative Mordak of the Military Advisory Council, a scarred veteran who looked like a walking tank, provided the strategic perspective that changed everything. Honored Council, I have reviewed the tactical footage from New Haven 17 times. The coordination displayed by these Earth creatures represents military capability that our own forces would struggle to match. But more importantly, it represents loyalty that cannot be purchased, commanded, or replicated. He gestured toward Winston. This creature did not fight for territory, resources, or dominance. It fought for love, and in doing so, it achieved victory against overwhelming odds. Any species wise enough to cultivate such partnerships deserves our respect, not our exploitation. The debate continued for another 3 hours, but the outcome was becoming clear. Speaker Thylos called for preliminary voting on the proposed amendments to Galactic law. The first motion passed overwhelmingly. Any being demonstrated to be in a genuine partnership relationship with another species shall be considered a family unit under Galactic law, regardless of the intelligence classification of the individual members. The second motion required more debate, but eventually passed. The separation of bonded family units, regardless of species composition, shall be considered an act of violence equivalent to assault. The third motion created the framework that would reshape galactic civilization. Worlds inhabited by species demonstrating genuine interspecies partnerships shall receive automatic protection status, with expedited processing for all legal applications. But the final motion was the most significant of all. Proposed by Representative Silandra and supported by an unlikely coalition of military advisors and peace advocates, it passed with only 17 dissenting votes out of the Council's 412 members. The Galactic Council hereby recognizes the category of companion protector as a legal entity with full rights to defend their bonded family members using any means necessary, regardless of the size, species, or official threat level of the aggressor. In simple terms, it meant that anyone who threatened a human child would have to face their companion animals in combat, and the galaxy's legal system would consider that a fair fight. After the session ended, Emma and Winston found themselves surrounded by representatives wanting to meet the beings who had changed galactic law. Winston tolerated the attention with typical honey badger patience, answering questions when asked, but never volunteering more information than necessary. "Why did you choose to fight?" asked Representative Crowthax, the same being who had originally opposed the legal changes. "You could have hidden, escaped, waited for help." Winston looked up at the massive alien with dark eyes that held depths the galaxy was still learning to understand. "Emma is my family. Family does not hide from danger. Family faces danger together." Dr. Chen watched the interactions with growing amazement. His daughter and her companion had inadvertently become ambassadors for an entirely new way of thinking about interspecies relationships. Requests for information about human-animal partnerships were flooding in from across the galaxy. 3 days later, as they prepared to return to New Haven, Emma and Winston received an unexpected visitor. Vraktar, now awaiting trial in council custody, had requested permission to speak with them. Dr. Chen was reluctant to allow the meeting, but Emma insisted. The former collector was confined in a maximum security cell, but he seemed somehow diminished without his intimidating ship and mercenary escort. When Emma and Winston entered the visiting area, Vraktar looked down at them with expressions that mixed confusion with something approaching respect. "I have been thinking about our encounters," Vraktar said slowly. "In my species' culture, strength is measured by size, by the ability to dominate others through force. But you—" He gestured toward Winston. "You defeated me not through size or superior weaponry, but through something I do not understand." Winston sat quietly beside Emma, apparently uninterested in the conversation but alert for any signs of threat. "What is this force that you possess?" Vraktar asked. Emma, with the clarity that only children can bring to complex questions, provided the answer that Vraktar had been seeking. "It's love," she said simply. "Winston loves me, so he protects me. I love him, so I stay with him when there's danger. It's not complicated." Vraktar stared at them for a long moment. In his centuries of life as a predator and collector, he had never encountered beings who willingly made themselves vulnerable for the sake of others. The concept was so foreign to his experience that he struggled to process it. "Love?" He repeated the word as if tasting something strange. "And this love makes you stronger?" "It makes us braver," Emma corrected. "Winston isn't stronger than you. He's just not afraid of you. And he's not afraid because protecting me is more important than being safe." The visiting session ended shortly after, but Vraktar's request to speak with the council's xenopsychologists suggested that their conversation had planted seeds that might eventually grow into understanding. On the transport back to Kepler 442b, Emma fell asleep with her head on Winston's back while the honey badger kept watch through the viewport. Dr. Chen studied the official documents that would formally establish Earth animals' legal rights throughout the galaxy. The legislation was already being called the Winston Laws in popular media, though the honey badger himself seemed unaware of his celebrity status. To him, he had simply done what any family member would do when threatened. He had fought back. But the implications of his actions were reshaping galactic civilization in ways that no one could have predicted. Human colonies throughout the galaxy were reporting changed attitudes from their alien neighbors, who now viewed human-animal partnerships with curiosity rather than condescension. Several species had begun requesting information about establishing similar relationships with creatures from their own worlds. Most significantly, the black market for exotic specimens had collapsed almost overnight. Collectors like Vraktar were discovering that their potential acquisitions might come with 25 pounds of pure fury attached, and the legal system would consider any resulting violence completely justified. As their ship approached Kepler 442b, Dr. Chen received a message from the settlement's mayor. New Haven had become something of a pilgrimage site for xenobiologists wanting to study human-animal cooperation. 3 universities had requested permission to establish research stations on the planet, and the Colonial Development Authority had approved funding for a major expansion. But the message that meant the most came from a Zalari trader who had witnessed the original attack on Emma. The tall, blue-skinned alien had sent a simple note. "Winston is welcome in my shop any time. Any friend of humans is a friend of the Zalari." Similar messages had been arriving from across the galaxy. Species that had previously viewed humans as just another promising colonial race were beginning to see them as something unique, a species that had learned to form genuine partnerships with the other creatures of their world. When they finally landed at New Haven, Emma and Winston found a settlement transformed. The modest agricultural colony had grown into a bustling hub of interspecies research and cooperation. But at its heart, it remained what it had always been, a place where families, regardless of their species composition, could live together in safety. That evening, as the alien suns set over the expanding settlement, Emma and Winston walked through the gardens where their adventure had begun. The berry bushes were heavy with fruit, the earth plants thriving in alien soil, and the future stretched ahead with infinite possibility. Winston paused to sniff at an interesting scent trail, his tail wagging slightly as he detected the presence of a new litter of kittens born to one of the settlement cats. New life, new family members to protect, new bonds to forge between species. Emma knelt beside her companion, wrapping her arms around his stocky form. "Do you think we really changed things, Winston?" Winston couldn't answer with words, but his rumbling purr conveyed contentment and satisfaction. He had protected his family, and his family was safe. By the simple standards of a honey badger's world, he had achieved everything that mattered. But across the galaxy, in council chambers and research stations, in colonies and trading posts, the legend of Winston the honey badger was already inspiring changes that would reshape civilization itself. Species were learning that strength came not from size or technology, but from the willingness to stand together in the face of danger. And somewhere in the vast darkness between stars, predators were learning a new truth. Earth's children never traveled alone. The galaxy had learned to fear nothing more than a honey badger protecting its family, and that, as any human could tell you, was exactly as it should be.